welcome Fadi Farhat, who's Senior Legal Officer at Gulbenkian Andonian Solicitors. I hope I got that right. Who is Tony Stowell's lawyer. Tony Stowell is a gentleman whose mother is in a care home, recorded a video showing basically what he would, I suppose, you could tell us more, describe as her being neglected, essentially. You've drafted the proposed legislation on this, on bringing in CCTV in care homes. So thanks for joining us this morning. What do you want the government to do?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Yes, so we've put forward a proposal which is part of Tony Stowell's campaign. He's called it Antonia's Law. And essentially, we'd like to have CCTV, all cameras enshrined, the right to have a CCTV or camera in a residence room enshrined in law. And the way the law has been, or the proposal has been framed, is that it would be, if the resident wanted it, at the resident's own cost, so as to not burden care homes with extra financial costs. And it would be the resident's choice, should they wish to have it, and they are in control of the camera or the camera unit, so they can decide to switch it on or switch it off as they please, without any sort of pressure or duress from family members.
And that must be really important, because at one level the camera is there as a protection for you, but on another, some of us, the last thing we'd want in those intimate sort of situations is the indignity of certain things that happen in your bedroom, and your elderly in particular, caught on camera, watched by our relatives.
Yes, exactly, and that's the balance that we have to strike. So it's always a balance to strike between the rights and the choice to empower the residents, but not to cross certain boundaries. And that's something that we were conscious about, because the moment you mention CCTV in care homes, you get words, connotations such as draconian, big brother, and the last thing we want is to have vulnerable members of our society subjected to this big brother culture. So the way the proposal was framed is that it's the resident's choice, they are in control, and we've had to take on board certain considerations such as human rights in relation to privacy, mental capacity, the legal framework on mental capacity, even data protection. And we've overcome that by the fact that it's the resident who's in control. So it's not the care home that's known as the data controller under data protection law, and that will bring a whole bunch of regulatory...
What if they are incapacitated? What if they're not capable of capacity, that they are suffering from serious dementia, for instance?
So it's important, if they lack mental capacity, then the choice, they can't exercise that right. So just like any other issue where someone lacks mental capacity, there could be a deputy appointed.
But then there's no camera.
No, so there could be, like with any other choice, where one lacks mental capacity, if they need to make a choice about how to spend their money or an important decision in relation to their welfare or medical treatment, that's usually done by a deputy appointed by the Court of Protection. So that deputy effectively is the eyes, ears and mouth of the care resident, and that deputy could, empowered by the Court of Protection, decide whether to have a camera for the benefit of that care home. And that would be in line with the current legal framework that we have. So we're not disturbing the legal landscape, as it were.
I completely understand. One question I think a lot of people would have with this is, well, what about the privacy? What about consent? And that's completely understandable. And what you're saying is, to overcome that, it would be the resident's choice. They'd have to approve this thing going in. They would own the infrastructure, essentially, the camera and footage. But I do see a flaw in that, insofar as, what about residents who can't afford it? Isn't this creating an almost two-tier system where residents who can afford to, have the system in place, they'll get a better quality, essentially, of care than those who can't? And isn't there a case to be made that actually, perhaps it's worth just considering a blanket, rolling these things out in a blanket way, so that you can ensure a universal, almost standard of care?
That's one concern that we had. And when we had a meeting, Tony Stowell, on behalf of his campaign, and I was present with the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, that was one thing that we raised, is that perhaps there could be an initial capital injection to provide the camera unit for all residents initially. But we left it open as to whether that would be the case, or whether residents could have it at their own cost. There